And konnichiwa, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. I'm your host, Rick the Barkeep, bringing you episode 161 here at the Tavern, presented by HeroTaku.com. So let's talk Evil Rangers. Our most recent Evil Ranger was introduced last week, the official debut of Zuo the World. Interesting concept, three animals in one. The fishing rod weapon is pretty lame, but hey, let's see where they go with it. Overall, I was impressed with his introduction. I did not see today's episode that aired. I usually wait till Thursday to go ahead and get the translations from TV Nihon. So, by that fact, if I say something that the episode's going to contradict me on, I do apologize for that. But I have an overall general thesis about Evil Rangers that I think Zuo the World, based on the events at hand, currently fits into. And when we were actually we were introduced to him 2 weeks ago at the ending, which was a good teaser for the following episode, where we see that the villains have captured 3 Zoomen and a human. They got the rhino, the crocodile, and the wolf, and they're infusing our human, who, by the way, is chained up with the Zoomen powers so that he can become Zuo the World. And this, to me, it's a problematic trend that we are seeing within Power Rangers, primarily, maybe not as much Super Sentai, but then again, I haven't seen every single episode of Super Sentai. It's that we have a villain who chooses a 6th Ranger, or 2 Rangers, to fight against the Power Rangers, or Sentai, who is good to begin with, is somehow manipulated or corrupted by our main villain into fighting the Rangers, and then by the end of the arc or the episode or whatever, they turn good, they fight with the Rangers because they were always good to begin with. Now, of course, this excludes teams like the Mutant Rangers and the Psycho Rangers, who were, the minions already, and they were monsters, so they were already working for the enemy. But I'm just really getting tired, primarily in Power Rangers, which is where I'm going to skew this mainly. I'm just getting tired of our villains picking good people to be the evil Rangers, and then they're surprised when the spell is broken or the brainwashing is worn off, and that they join the Power Ranger team. I mean, it's just kind of an odd thing, don't you guys think? That Rita. Let's take Rita. Let's take the very first example in Power Rangers. We know why Rita chose Tommy initially. We had the martial arts tournament, and he was able to stand his own with Jason, who arguably was the most powerful Power Ranger, or at least the most proficient in martial arts. So much so that he brought him to a draw. And then, of course, Rita tested him by sending a whole squad of putties at him, and Tommy was able to go ahead and stop him. Which, at that point in the series, was an amazing feat, because no Ranger could take on an entire team of putties by themselves. So Rita was attracted to Tommy based on his physical strength, martial arts skills, and the fact that he's already fought Jason and he has an understanding of his fighting to a certain degree. But Rita has to put him under a spell to obey him. And of course, it's tied into the Sword of Darkness, and once the Sword of Darkness is destroyed, then Tommy's good again, he's remorseful, so he's going to take the power that he has, join the Power Rangers, and fight against the Rita and evil in general. Now, here's the problem I have with Rita's plan. Why couldn't she just get somebody who was already evil to be her evil Ranger, to be her evil Green Ranger? Why did she have to pick somebody that was good? I mean, don't get me wrong, Tommy's a great fighter, and of course everything I mentioned is exemplified in that episode, but there's probably got to be about 100 better fighters across the world that Rita could have picked, and I'm sure there's a good number of them who are easily corrupted. So why did Rita choose somebody who is naturally good to begin with, only to brainwash him, and then there's that chance that he could be good again and go back to the Rangers? Doesn't it make more sense that Rita could find somebody, who's a martial arts expert, but is like a real bastard, and just will do it for the money or to see the world burn or something? Wouldn't that be a little bit more difficult? I mean, imagine how that fight goes where Jason destroys the Sword of Darkness, and it doesn't do anything to the evil Green Ranger who's just going to kill Jason anyway. He's like, I'll bring out my gun and I'll shoot you, or I'll choke you to death, or something like that. Why doesn't Rita get somebody who is inherently bad or evil to begin with to fight against the Rangers? And this isn't the only time that that happens in the series. Our next evil ranger that we have is Ryan from Lightspeed Rescue. Now, the odd thing about Ryan, in my mind, is that, well, again, he's a child. He's, I think, about 7, maybe 8 years old when he's kidnapped, and he goes to live with the demons in Diabolico. Now, Ryan, we know, is not an evil person. That's part of his arc. Is he's been with evil for so long, and his father says there's an ocean of goodness in him, something to that effect. And then he takes up the mantle of being the Titanium Ranger. Once the love of his father and his sister come through, and that whole shtick, basically. Um, but the thing about Diabolico is, why did he have to take Ryan as a child? Why do you have to take a good child? Couldn't he go someplace other in the world, or go to Detroit and get yourself a street punk or something like that who's had horrible upbringing, or you go to the Middle East and get a religious fundamentalist child who you can still raise in that way. There's so many other children that he could have kidnapped that already were bad or had bad backgrounds that you could have taken into that situation. But no, he had to go for a good child and try to corrupt him over a period of, I think it was, 10 years. Which he didn't succeed, because I don't know about you guys, but if I was, 8 years old and, I was living for demons for a full decade, I think that would psychologically affect me more than it did Ryan, which is one of the problems with his overall character, I think, but that's neither here nor there. It's the fact that Diabolico chose a good individual to be his evil ranger. We get the next time we get this is with Hunter and Blake, who are good, but they're easily misled. And it actually didn't take Lothar any type of brainwashing thing specific. All he had to do was implicate Sensei in the murder of their parents or the death of their parents, and that's all they needed. Now, of course, the reason he chose them is because they have the thunder powers granted, but there's no reason why Lothar couldn't, kill them, take their powers, and then give the powers to, someone else in his army, or recruit somebody who, again, was truly evil. And of course, then the next one we have Trent, but that's a unique situation all on its own. But again, it raises the question why our enemies decide to choose good people to become evil, only for them to again revert to good by the end of the arc. Now, I suppose there is a little bit of irony in it. I mean, consider, again, go back to the Green Ranger, that the ironic part of the whole thing is that the Power Rangers would be destroyed by one of their own, a teenager with attitude who's good but fights for the side of evil. So there is something, I guess, poetic in it. But there's nothing really practical in it. Not to say that Rita is the most practical of villains. Um, Nevertheless, it would make more sense for her to go after somebody who is evil. And that happens with all of our villains, is anytime that they pick somebody, they usually pick somebody who's of good standing. Now, there are two unique instances of this, and I say two because one is kind of a definite and the other one is up to fan interpretation, but I'm going to give you guys my interpretation, which is why I'm using two examples here. Now, of course, we all know that A Squad does betray Kruger and SPD at the end of that series. Now, a lot of people do believe that A Squad was corrupted, that they were already bad people, and that's how Grum was able to easily recruit them. I would like to believe that, but again, I sincerely don't believe that they were corrupted or they were evil to begin with. Again, Omni was the overall villain of the series. Omni was able to control both Grum and Morgana with mind control. And you can't tell me that you have a villain who specializes in mind control. That's his whole thing, and he's a giant brain. And you're able to get 5 Power Rangers without mind control. Again, that's fan interpretation, but again, that's my interpretation. So the way I look at it is that Omni was able to get 5 good Rangers, brainwash them, and unfortunately, they didn't turn back to good at the end of the episode. I would say they still had influence by Omni over them, but again, that's up to your interpretation. But I think the only time we really did get a couple of bad apples, as it were, who did become Power Rangers were the Dark Rangers. Now, of course, I've talked extensively in a previous podcast about the Dark Rangers, but it's worth revisiting that Zed did have a good plan here. And Zed, again, of all the villains that we've had, really kind of had the right idea. Honestly, Astronema did better with the Psycho Rangers, but again, she wasn't taking, humans in turning them into Power Rangers. She was taking, I guess monsters or cyborgs or whatever the Psycho Rangers ultimately became. But again, Zed had the right idea. He was able to go ahead and find himself a bunch of disenfranchised teenagers who were already in a group. They were bullies. They were grayer bullies than Bulk and Skull. And had they had the chance to go ahead and fight, they probably would have been sufficient. I don't know what their martial arts background is. I don't think the episode directly explains that. But Zed did the right thing. He took five punks, five badasses, whatever you want to go ahead and call, who are not, morally in the right, and decided to go ahead and make them Power Rangers. But why is Zed the only one to go ahead and do this? Why isn't this something that happens more often? And actually, I do want to bring this up as well because this I just find interesting, and this is from the Ranger Wiki. According there was a comic back in 1995 called Dark Thunder, in which Zed tries the Dark Ranger scheme again, although this time using the Dino coins that he somehow came in possession with. I actually haven't read the comic. I'm just reading the cliff notes from Wikipedia here. And basically what he does is he does choose five criminals from across the world to become his Dark Rangers. A bully, a pickpocket, a looter, a gang member, and I don't know what Stanford Winter is supposed to go ahead if you have never seen that word before. But Zed was able to go ahead and find himself some evil people to become evil Rangers. Oh, and of course, I should mention Korag. He's somebody else who was manipulated by evil into being, manipulated by the Master to become evil, then became good again. And of course, then Nick went through the same thing. But of course, I think that had more to do with story than anything else. So here's the ultimate question. And again, we're gonna stick with Power Rangers. I'm sure this has happened a lot in Sentai, but again, I haven't seen every episode of Sentai, so I'm not as well versed in it. But why don't the villains ever go for an evil teen? I mean, why don't they go to the streets of LA and recruit them a couple of gang members, or go to Denver and get some Crips or get some Bloods or something like that? Why isn't that we're getting these evil people? Why is it that we have to have the good characters? Now, obviously, I think a lot of people out there are going to point to the fact that, well, they have to be good because then they're going to become good heroes at the end of the story. Well, of course, if that's the way you want to go and have good Rangers at the end and add to your ranks, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. But why can't they be bad and maybe make it more of a challenge for them to be Power Rangers? One of the issues I had with the Merrick story in Wild Force, and he doesn't really count as an evil ranger because Zanako is a wholly different being, is that Merrick blamed himself for committing the acts that Zanako had committed, even though he wasn't in control at all. It was just his body was being taken over by Zanako. But he doesn't join the Rangers immediately. He goes off on his own, wanders, and ends up at the only bar that serves root beer instead of real beer. And it's a dramatic cheat to keep Merrick from joining the Rangers immediately because he's got this story arc where he's got to feel guilty, yada yada yada, stuff like that, and he immediately joins the team. I swear, both in Power Rangers and Sentai, they do the same thing where the Sixth Ranger should join immediately, but for whatever reason, he doesn't join immediately. Like, the only time this actually happened where he joined immediately after being broken from the spell was Tommy, and that was great. Go ahead and get him in there. But characters like Trent and Hunter and Blake and Ryan, they all got to go off on some damn spirit quest or self-actualizing journey or whatever and all that, when all we want to do is just see them get into the story because they are good people. Yeah, they did something wrong, they were manipulated, boo-hoo for you, go fight evil. That's just the attitude that I have with it. And because they're good, it doesn't make those stories that interesting. But if you took, say, let's say that Tommy, not Tommy, let's say Ryan. Let's say Ryan was an evil child, he killed small animals or whatever. He was just really, really bad. Um, and then, he fights off the demons and, I'm going to turn against you guys. And then he goes off to do his whatever and stuff because he doesn't want to join the Rangers because no, I can't talk tonight. Ideologically speaking, he's not compatible with the Power Rangers. They don't believe in the same things. So he's not going to join the Power Rangers. Let, let me let me diverge here for a quick second. So I was living with this girl when I was about 20, and she brought home one of her boyfriends one day, and I was working at a telecommunications job, and he was talking to me one day, and I hated this guy. He was just no good. Uh, and he asked me, "Yo, dude, can you get me a job at so and so?" I'm not going to give the name of the company. He's like, "Can you get me a job there?" And I turned to him and I go, can you pass a drug test?" And he's like, never mind then. And that's that guy pretty much summed up. But I do remember the three of us got in a conversation one time about Power Rangers, and it was like, it's three people having a conversation with one person who doesn't respect it, second person who has absolutely no idea what's going on, and and the third one was me. um, and the guy had pretty much made the point saying, if I was a Power Ranger, man, I'd be going busting some ass and busting some cops and whatever and stuff like that. Basically, his whole feeling was, if I had the power of the Power Rangers, I would go out and shoot and murder some people and get away with wherever the hell that I want. And of course, I told her this guy ain't right for you, and she never listened. But that's a whole nother thing to get into. It's not Power Ranger related, but that premise should be something we should see in Power Rangers, where our villain does pick somebody who should not, by all means, be a Power Ranger, somebody who is not the best upstanding citizen, probably the worst of society, and then use them to kick the Power Rangers' ass. Why is that a story that we have not seen yet? And I feel that even Sentai is continuing this trend with their new Zuo the World character. Because, like I said at the beginning, it doesn't seem like he is a willing participant in this experiment to become Zuo the World. I firmly believe, based on the evidence that I know at this time, that he is going to be some innocent guy who they just picked up because he looks strong, or they picked him up at random, whatever the case may be. They filled him with this power, they warped his mind or whatever, and then the Zoology are able to break the spell or the hold that they have, and he becomes good, and he joins the team after a while because he's got to go soul searching, or he doesn't think he's worthy, blah blah blah, yada yada, whatever and stuff. But how much more interesting would that plot be if this guy who's Zuo the World is like some, serial killer or rapist or whatever and stuff, just like a very bad person? I mean, say what you will about the villains in Spider-Man, but one of the more interesting things that I liked about Carnage, not to say that I like Carnage, but the interesting things about it is that his host, Cletus Cassidy, was a serial killer, and that's what led the symbiote to him, because he's just a deranged, psychotic person. Why can't we have that in Power Rangers and Sentai? Why can't we have the scum of the earth as a Power Ranger? And if you, again, you want to turn them good, have a chance of a story of redemption, of true redemption, where you have somebody who's at the lowest of society, is given this amazing power, abuses it for all the wrong reasons, is shown the light, and has to actually reform in some way. And again, not that, oh, I fought the Power Rangers or yada yada stuff like that, but an actual reform where he has to turn his life around, where he has to go from being the criminal to being the good person, to use his powers for good, whereas before he was using them for evil. Isn't that a much more interesting story to see in Power Rangers? Is something to see in Sentai? Because I mean, the story that you have is fine, Evil Ranger, brainwashed, misled, whatever, becomes good. They're going to use that again multiple times, I'm sure of it. But change it up. Make it make a little bit more sense because again, these villains going for goody goods and then being surprised that they turn against them. Find somebody who is in line with your beliefs that will follow you or you can pay the money to. I mean, heck, Rancid could have found himself a bunch of people to recruit against the Time Force Rangers if he just paid them money. Because they were stealing a lot in that series, weren't they? So I think my overall conclusion is that we need to change up the formula for evil rangers. We need to find those true bastards of society who have nothing redeemable about them, but then we try to find a way to redeem them because they become Power Rangers. That the turning point in their life that makes them give up their ways is by becoming a Power Ranger. That source of virtue and paragon and whatever you want to go ahead and call it. That epiphany in their life is to become a Power Ranger. And how strong a message that would send about what a Power Ranger is and what a Power Ranger stands for, and how the worst people in the world who may be killers, rapists, or Wall Street executives can go in there, get the power, and then actually use it for good because they realize being a Power Ranger is a moral responsibility. I know there's in comics, Marvel, DC, and whatnot, where we've had the bad guy turn to a hero. I think Black Widow is one of the more predominant examples, but I would really like to see this in Power Rangers. Somebody who can actually be guilty for true heinous acts and crimes that he's done, and I want to see him get to it. That's something I want to go ahead and see. And again, I just will reiterate before closing this out, I still think A Squad was under mind control, so please, in the comments, you can say if you believe it, that they were under there, but again, they just don't fit my view of it. But anyway, leave your comments below. Let me know what you guys think. Is this something you want to see in the series? Is this something do you think maybe practical? Maybe with the upcoming feature, do you think this is something Sentai can achieve with their more lax standards? Let me know. Leave a comment below. Otherwise, I want to thank you guys for listening. Have a good evening, and the tavern is now closed.